watching Goal Line Extended, presented by Lacrosse Flash.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Goal Line Extended, a new lacrosse show out of the Lacrosse Flash podcast network. Today is Tuesday, March 23rd, and my name is Ryan Hulsebos. I will be your host. You might recognize my name from the show I did this past summer covering the 2020 PLL Championship Series. It was called Behind the Back. Well, with this project, we're trying to take a giant leap up from that one. I've partnered with Lacrosse Flash to bring you Goal Line Extended, a lacrosse show dedicated to covering the Premier Lacrosse League, the National Lacrosse League, and Division I college lacrosse. We'll be uploading shows every Tuesday and Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern, with the exception of this week, as we'll be getting you a show on Thursday before the PLL's entry draft. You can catch it on YouTube or on whatever podcast platform you use to listen to your podcast. You can also follow along on Instagram and Twitter at GL Extended. All the links that you will need will be down below in the description. Now, you might be asking yourself, what should I expect from Goal Line Extended? And I'm telling you to expect this. We'll be bringing you recaps of the most notable college lacrosse games and talking about the biggest storylines as we close out the 2021 college lacrosse season and look ahead to conference championships in the NCAA tournament in May. Over the next few weeks, we'll also be getting you ready for the 2021 PLL season, set to start on June the 4th. Between now and then, we'll be bringing you extensive coverage ahead of the 2021 PLL entry draft, scheduled for this Thursday night, March 25th, and ahead of the 2021 PLL college draft, which is set for Tuesday night, April 6th, and amidst what should be a very exciting 2 months as we approach the 2021 season. Joining me in these discussions will be a panel of Lacrosse Flash reporters and analysts, and at the end of each show, I'll be joined by a guest, either a player, a coach, or another lacrosse personality. For today's show, my guest will be Cannon's LSM Reece Eddy, who was drafted 5th overall by Cannon's head coach Sean Quirk in the PLL expansion draft earlier this month. I want to thank you all for watching and or listening to our first show. It's been a while in the making, and I really hope that you all enjoy. Now, my vision for this show is to be an upbeat, a lot of fun, back and forth between myself and those on the other end of the screen talking about exactly what you are here to listen to, and that is lacrosse. But unfortunately, we're kicking today's show off in a not so fun way because on Saturday, March 13th, an incident occurred at a Division III college located about 50 miles northwest of Chattanooga, Tennessee. And myself, as well as the rest of the Lacrosse Flash team, think that it is really important that we continue to bring awareness to these issues and cover it, as we did not have a show last week. And this still is a story that continues to grow, and we want to continue to bring awareness to it. The University of the South, more commonly known as Sewanee, hosted Emmanuel College in a men's lacrosse game back on March 13. And during the game, racial slurs were shouted at players on the Emmanuel College team by Sewanee students attending the game. The university is yet to identify those responsible, but has since opened an investigation into the incident and has reported it to the Southern Athletic Association for review in hopes that we can try to prevent these situations from happening again. But as we continue to see time and time again, they keep happening. And unfortunately for Sewanee, this seems like just a small piece to a much larger problem. In a statement, Sewanee condemned the actions of those at the game and apologized to Emmanuel College as well as its players and coaches. We have heard statements from Emmanuel College and U.S. Lacrosse. In the wake of the incident, various people on social media have voiced their concerns in the days after. But that only does so much. I want to welcome Jordan Johnson, Lacrosse Flash writer and analyst, to join me in this conversation because this is an issue that I know hits home for you. And as someone that has unfortunately had to experience instances like this, what else do we need to do to make sure that these instances don't keep happening?
Well, man, first of all, just an honor to be on here, an honor to get to talk to you here today on this show. First of all, my heart goes out to the students of Emmanuel College, to those players that had to experience this. Unfortunately, it's not the first time we've seen something like this in the lacrosse world. And look, man, to answer your question, there is no right answer. There is no solution. I can sit here and talk. Anybody can sit here and talk, but the message is only going to go so far. It's kind of we can kind of need to start asking am I doing something? And that's you, me, whoever. Instead of we as humans, we ask the who, what, when, why. We're all guilty of it. We do it. But the next step is am I doing something? Am I promoting a culture that accepts everyone? And not to mention, too, the incident that we had last week in regards to the attacks on Asian Americans. This is a humanity issue. This isn't Black lives. This isn't Asian lives, whoever. There's certain instances, and I'm not trying to ignore the incidents themselves, but as a whole speaking, this is a humanity issue. And we need to start asking ourselves, instead of who's going to speak next, who's going to talk about this, who's going to talk about that. What are we doing? What are we doing? Because at the end of the day, it's us, whether it's media, whether you're a coach, you're a player, we determine where this thing goes from here. And I mean, you can say it how you will, especially with everything that happened in 2020.
Absolutely, definitely just a tough story that just comes across. It seems like too often we're hearing about this stuff, and it seems like every time especially after the demonstrations we saw in 2020, it seemed like we were past all this, but it just continues to come up, and it's unfortunate. Just as a lacrosse community, it's unfortunate that we have to continue to talk about these instances. But as you're saying, very important that we keep these conversations going so that we can hopefully one day maybe find an end to this.
Right. I kind of rubber back to a concept that Jovan Miller, you guys know who Jovan Miller is, MLL All-Star, one of the greatest players playing the MLL. He's been, as a lot of you know, he's been outspoken about these issues going back for years before 2020. And he was on his Instagram story over the weekend explaining the concept of, are you going to be a student versus the learner? And in 2020, I kind of deem it like this. Before 2020, a lot of people would walk past the class, see the teacher teaching it, and be like, this is an interesting class to take in regards to all these issues going on. Then 2020, okay, let me sign up for this class. And now that next kind of step is for who? If you're in the class, you can be a student all you want. I'm a college student, I'm going to be real. I'm a student in certain classes and I learn in certain classes, right? This is the one where you want to learn. Like being a student in this class, especially if you're affiliated in lacrosse or whatever, just in general, is that enough? Probably not. I'm not going to even say probably not. It's not. A lot of people sat up there, listened to Jovi, whoever, BLA, Angie Tari on the women's side, whoever, and then they just, they went about their day, That's why this stuff keeps coming up. It's because people are just listening. Okay, clap, clap. Yeah, they said it. We're going to look at them. It's not who or whenever. It's like, all right, you're glad you're listening, but yet we're still listening, but yet this stuff's still coming up, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the next step is like, and Jovi said, all right, you become a student at the class. Are you going to your friend, your teammate? Are you saying, hey, we're going to cut this, whether it's a word, whether it's a demonstration we're doing, whatever? Are we going to cut it out? Or are we just going to let it go, because everybody makes it look good for the camera, like, oh, we're just not going to do this on camera. Let's not put this on social, let's slide away from this. But are you really doing that? And it's like, I don't know, like me, a lot of other people, like these incidents, like we hear about them in public, but I can't speak for other people. I get stuff in my DMs about stuff happening that doesn't go public. And it's like at least for myself, it's at least like once or twice a month you hear about something dumb. Like, and I'm not going to put anybody on the spot because their stuff is private for a reason. But it's like too many of this stuff is happening. Everybody that was quote unquote listening and doing stuff. I mean, and that's not to diminish everyone who is. Don't get me wrong there. Let me make that point whatsoever, because the progress that we were, or lack thereof before all of this happened to where it's at now, if anything, last year accelerated that. And so, like, let me just get that out the way now. Don't want to diminish any of that. But at the same time, it's like we still have a long way to go, and that's kind of that next step is like, all right, we've gotten a lot more students now to sign up for the class. Now we need, how many of them are going to be the learners, right? Take something out of it, especially within our game of lacrosse. We were sitting here talking about this in terms of lacrosse, but this is like life, man. Like this is stuff people got to deal with every day, you know?
Absolutely. I really like that analogy that you use with the student in the class, or just simply being simply a student in the class, or being an actual learner in the class. Because as a college student myself as well, I can totally see where you're coming from. There's some classes that, yeah, you go there, it's like sometimes you're in it, sometimes you're not totally in it. But there are your other classes where, yeah, you were always paying attention during these other classes. This is one of them that seems like this is one that you have to pay attention, and you have to learn, and you have
No
to really
doubt.
absorb what everybody like yourself and like Jovan Miller are kind of saying, because you guys are the ones that kind of have experienced those experiences.
And let me say this too. Like, let me just get this out the way. I haven't stepped on the field. I come from the journalism background. I've been outspoken about some stuff, whether it's in media, journalism, representation. That's another thing. Look, the stuff that I've gotten compares nothing and fails to what other people have gotten. I'm not sitting here, I don't want a pity story whatsoever. I'm sitting here because I know I have a voice in media as I kind of go along, and I want to be that help those people who are, whether it's on the field, off the field, not only share their stories, but help so that other people are aware and kind of help this movement. Because this is, like I've said this before, the same stuff that people deal with on the field, like these issues of underrepresentation, underfunding, whatever. This is stuff is in our industry and what we're sitting here doing right now. These are the same issues, you know? And so I just want to make that clear. Like, by no means am I taking my experiences, comparing them to anyone else, or, you know, because what can really, to be honest with you, some of the stuff I hear, like trolls and all this and people coming at me, it's nothing compared to what guys like Jovi have, Chaz, you know, guys that have heard things on the field. Some of these kids now, some of the stuff these kids are saying, anything, not to compare, but it's like Jesus. Like, even like we've been out of school a couple years, and it's like Jesus, some of the stuff that they're hearing compared to when we were, it's like, whoo. But yeah, just wanted to make that slight point. But
Absolutely, absolutely. In the wake of this incident, Oglethorpe University, another Division III university in Georgia, they canceled their game with Sewanee that was scheduled for this past Saturday in support of their players. Sewanee is set to host Birmingham Southern this Friday night at 6 p.m. Eastern. We have not heard anything yet about that game getting canceled. But what do these cancellations mean going forward, and do you expect to see more cancellations as Sewanee continues to go about their season this year?
look, man, I think it's an individual program by program basis. I can't, you know, this brings up a concept of cancel culture, and I don't want to cancel people right away. The University of the South program, they can learn from this, they can move forward. But at the same time, I can't blame their opponents for not wanting to go in there, especially, you know, it's an issue within their lacrosse program, just in my opinion, just in how, because clearly there was a culture there that allowed that, but that's a bigger school issue as well. Though it wasn't anybody on the lacrosse team that said it, those fans came there and they felt like they could say whatever the heck they wanted, right? So it's both an issue within the program and in the school. And like from my perspective, if I was on a player on the opposing team, would I want to go in there right away? Probably not. I can't sit here and say, like, I'm not in that position, but if I had to, I probably wouldn't. So I can't sit here and blame a program who doesn't. But at the same time, it's like, if you want to go in there and play as a program, I don't, go ahead. You're well within your right to. You know, I think these programs that are going to play them, they're probably going to do their due diligence, make sure that the safety's there, whatnot, from that standpoint. And hey, like, especially in this year, you know, the game's got to get played. So I can't, either way, I don't blame programs for what they want to do, you know?
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, when it comes to racial issues, Jordan, what questions are we not asking? Because as I said before, and as you mentioned, we're seeing this, it's like a recurring incident. We saw it in Georgia around the Asian Americans and the long history of violence and harassment that they have had to endure. These problems aren't going away. What questions aren't we asking around issues like this that might be holding us back from really figuring out solutions to these problems?
Like I said earlier, I think we're asking, even as humans, we're all guilty of it. We ask the who, what, when, why, right? Who did this? When was it? Why? What was the motivation behind it? But the next thing that we kind of miss is like, all right, how and right? The how is, how did this happen? How can we move forward, right? I think too often we get caught up in each individual incident rather than how can we go about this? How can we go about this? And then, like I said earlier, the am I? Am I reaching out to a teammate? Am I not saying this word? Or am I representing myself in how I would on a camera or wherever to eliminate this, right? I mean, and nobody's perfect. I'm not sitting here saying that you and I are perfect people. Sometimes we all say stuff. We don't mean it. We go back on it, whatever. Sometimes you have to apologize. You have to do whatever you have to do. We're humans. We learn. But at the same time, it's when we say the culture, we can't have the culture of that, right? What things are going to happen one time or another. The whole point of eliminating these things is to make sure it's not consistent, right?
Absolutely.
This shouldn't be this pattern of where we hear about one thing 1 week and then the next thing we hear about the exact same incident or something like it, right? So those are the questions that we're not kind of asking is the am I? We're asking too many of the kind of the little ones who, what, the low hanging fruits in the sense of these incidences and the who's going to speak out about this. What are they saying about this? I mean, to be honest with you, like I get all of these organizations, love what they're doing. That's separate from, I think that's part of the how, but that's like too many people try to combine all of this together and it's, oh, these organizations are saying this and that. So I'm just going to get behind this organization. It's like, you can get behind the organization and still deal with it within yourself and within your individual programs, right?
Absolutely.
So like that's kind of what's not being addressed to say. I don't know if there's a specific question for say, but it's more so like people like want to gravitate towards organizations and understandably so, like so quickly before they like realize that before this thing changes in order for this thing to change as a whole, not only are those organizations going to do work because it's individual people coming together for one cause, but it's within the individual person, as a whole. Like we are one, like lacrosse is one big sport. Society is one big congregation. I don't know, like what the word is to kind of describe it, but it's one big group of people coming together, right? That's kind of what we need to hit on.
You talked about the culture within lacrosse and trying to change that culture. You brought up representation. How do we go about changing this culture within lacrosse?
I read a U.S. lacrosse article that was kind of addressed to coaches, right? And it was like, are you gonna save space in your recruiting classes? Are you gonna go out and actually recruit the kids from other sports? So as far as from from a participatory level on that sense, that's certainly a way to go about it. There's also the grassroots concept where, hey, are we going out in these neighborhoods where, like where I'm at, most kids around here can go buy a stick, have it set up around here. I'm right outside of Annapolis. Like a lot of these kids can, but there's other areas right by me, like where unfortunately the funding isn't there. Not every kid could go buy a $200 stick. Not every area has the ability to go that. Not every area has the sticks available. And not only that, you got to make it fun. Like we talked about earlier, the opponents too. And a lot of people have said, like, how do you tell a kid go play this sport when you're going to hear, unfortunately, you're going to hear an N-word called at you, or you're going to hear somebody's going to say you shouldn't be playing that, right? Mm-hmm. Like I deem it from my perspective. Like, look, I grew up right outside of Annapolis. Before I started covering lacrosse in high school, thought it was the most frat boy sport, shorts, whatever. All of the stereotypes you can think of. I started covering it, realized how nice and genuine the people are, and I think we need to continue that momentum, right? Within that
Absolutely,
momentum, because as soon as you get in, it's such a small community, and everyone's so willing and accepting of one another. It's just we got to do a better job of the outreach of that, because I think, like you said, once you get in through one person or another, you can kind of realize real quick, like, hey, some of these stereotypes are not true. Like, these people are good dudes, But from the outside perspective, and I ask this to a lot of my friends now, like, what do you think from the outside of lacrosse? A lot of my friends, I'll post everything and whatnot on Instagram, Snapchat. Everybody asks why you do that, because I just want you to see it in a different light, right? Because especially being here in Maryland, like I said, a lot of people here see, by being a hotbed, seeing it in frat boy culture, hanging out in downtown Annapolis, do up to no good, whatever. But it's like, in reality, this is one of the most tight-knit communities ever. Like, we just got to do a better job of portraying that, per se. That's just there's no, like I said, with all of these issues, there's no right way to go about it. It's subjective, I think. But in my opinion, being somebody that was from the outside, in terms of not only representation, of as a person of color, but just in the sport in general, coming from the media side, not playing, I think that, like, I can bring the perspective of, hey, I was on the outside. This is what it looked like. Now that I'm sort of on the inside, hey, this is what we need to make it look like, so that it appeals to the person who's never seen it. Things like college lacrosse on ESPN and the PLL, when we see it on TV, this is, like, I love that, because this is how it appeals, to people, like, we can have a whole discussion about streaming another day, but are we putting good games in front of eyes versus behind a paywall, things like that? How are we appealing to people from the outside is really, I mean, look, appearance is one thing, and then once you get people on the inside too, you got to make sure you have the right people that keep them in, retention is the biggest thing. You can get people from the outside all you want, but you got to have the right people within it to kind of keep them interested, keep them engaged, whether they pick up a stick or not,
Absolutely.
The biggest thing is engagement with this thing, you're not going to get everybody to pick up a stick. I'm not the most athletic person. I know I can't step out on the field and do some of the things that some people are doing, and I'm okay with that. But guess what? I'm just as engaged as anyone, And I think if you can get that out of people, you can get more people to do that. Sort of like from the football, the soccer sense. A lot of people aren't athletes, but they love football. They're engaged within football. Same thing, soccer, MMA, wrestling, whatever it is. You can get a lot more of those people. That's where you kind of go, and that's where you can get some of that positive momentum, and people can actually see the good within the community and whatnot.
Jordan, I don't know if you saw this weekend, Tehoka Nanticoke went right hand to left hand, one hand, scored SC top 10. I'm completely fine with not being able to do that. I'm completely accepting of his
right
talent
there with you.
compared to my lacrosse talent that really isn't there. We're gonna accept not being these big time lacrosse players. Jordan, I want to thank you for coming on and talking about the incidents like these. I know it can be tough to talk about sometimes, especially as these incidents just continue to happen, but it's those tough conversations, as we're saying, that will hopefully rectify these issues and prevent them from happening again. So thank you for coming on to talk about this. Jordan will be sticking around with us as we get into our college lacrosse conversation. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back. Welcome back to the show. Jordan Johnson is here. I am your host, Ryan Hulsebos, and let's get right into this college lacrosse weekend that we had this past week. We had a handful of great games. Michigan upset Penn State, if we really want to call that an upset. Penn State is now out of the Inside Lacrosse top 20 after dropping their last few games. We saw a few blowouts from some of the ACC powerhouses, North Carolina, Syracuse, and Notre Dame all handling business as they each inch closer to their ACC gauntlet. But probably the most intriguing game was Robert Morris taking Virginia down to the wire. Virginia ended up coming out on top behind 5 goals and an assist from Peyton Cormier, a hat trick from Dox Aiken, and a goal and 4 assists from Matt Moore. Connor Schellenberger also had a goal and 3 assists. And LSM Jared Connors, one of the top LSMs ahead of the PLL college draft, scored a goal and added an assist as well. PD LaSalle almost perfect from the stripe, finishing at 82%. For Robert Morris, Jimmy Perkins, Ryan Smith, and Corson Keeley each scored hat tricks, along with Perkins' 4 assists and Smith's 3 assists. Jordan, it's not really a surprise that Robert Morris took, as I said before, another ACC team all the way to the finish. They had Duke on their heels back in February to open up the season. But is this more Virginia struggling in certain areas? Obviously not at the face-off. LaSalle was incredible, but is this more Virginia struggling in certain areas, or do you think it's Bobby Moe just continuing to play really good lacrosse against really good competition?
I think it's certainly a combination of both. Look, we know Bobby Moe at the end of the year is going to be right there. You know, once they get in conference play, I think they're going to get rolling. Look, they had a tough out of conference, just about as anybody. And look, they played to it. Give them credit. And they played it well. So I think once they kind of get rolling in their conference play, we start to see Jimmy Perkins look like himself a little bit more again, as he's starting to now. He was kind of off for a couple weeks. Now he's starting to look more and more like the Jimmy Perkins, the 7th-year guy. So I think they'll be right back in the thick of things. And then from the Virginia front, they've really came down to their opponents, I believe, in the last few weeks. Look, we all saw that Syracuse game, and I think that was more of an indication on Syracuse, because to me, Virginia on paper is right up there with Duke and Maryland as far as they can be the number 1 team in the country. They truly play like it, especially on offense. They might have the most loaded offense in college lacrosse, right there with Duke, right there with Maryland. Although I think Maryland's defense is kind of what's going to be their key to staying in the top 5 and whatnot. But look, Virginia's going to get tested. We all know the ACC gauntlet. They've already played Syracuse. They've already played UNC. They played UNC tough despite being down early in that game. And so the way they were able to come back in that second half showed me a lot about them. And look, we are still in March, right? We know Virginia's going to be down there as we get towards the late April and into May. We know Virginia's going to be right there with anybody. To say that they are the 3rd best team in the ACC, I wouldn't say that right now. 2 weeks ago, before they played Syracuse, I would have said they are the best team in the ACC. But look, you played out into your opponents. This is what happens. As we have this discussion here in late April, I might be sitting here telling you that they're behind Duke. I think that the ACC, that group of UNC, Virginia, Notre Dame, whatever, is kind of going to Syracuse in that discussion too. Don't mean to leave them out. They're all going to play themselves into who's that second best team, right? Because I think we're in agreement that Duke, although being the slow start, has undefeated, playing down to some of their opponents. We all somewhat expect them to kind of take that leap above everyone else, right? I don't think I'm too crazy there, but I think Virginia has the ability to kind of be that second team if they can fix some of their struggles on defense, if they can get more guys playing together. It doesn't have to be Matt Moore scoring 5 a game. It doesn't have to be all Schellenberger, right? They have so many pieces, even with Bertrand, the D3, D2 to D1. Got to get that reference in. But, once they can get all of those guys playing together, which they were earlier in the year, surprisingly, and do that against good competition, I think when it's all said and done, they're going to be right up there with the Syracuses, the UNCs, and the Dukes and everyone else. And Jesus, that ACC is loaded.
All these teams have so much talent. As you're just naming all these teams, I'm thinking of the guys that they have on their teams. And I'm just like, well, UVA's got, as you said, Charlie Bertrand. We got Dox Aiken finally starting to figure it out, find the back of the net a few times. You got Matt Moore, Connor Schellenberger. You look at UNC, they got Trippy, they got just a handful of names.
I've heard Andy Towers say it multiple times. Their face-off unit might be the best in the country. And I say that even when TD gets to Denver, we'll see how that pans out. But just that 1-2 punch, man, like nobody's been able to stop it. Like, yeah, what's the face-off guy for Virginia? He started to get a little bit of success going on against it. I know it's really blanking my mind right now.
Petey LaSala, 82%.
Yeah, he was really in that second half was really getting it to. But I think that face-off unit is what's going to get them to the Final Four. They, like I said, we'll see how TD does when he gets out to Denver and their face-off guys. He's a stud within himself, how that 1-2 unit kind of goes. But right now, I have to agree with what I've kind of heard Andy Towers been saying over the last few weeks is that they have the best 1-2 face-off punch in the country right now.
Virginia is probably going to need that too heading into this ACC gauntlet as we're talking about. They will travel to Notre Dame on Saturday to take on the Irish. Robert Morris has a week off before heading to Jacksonville on April 3rd. Speaking of Notre Dame, the Irish took care of business against Cleveland State on Saturday, putting up 19 goals in a 19-5 rout of the Vikings. Goals seemed to come from all over, led by Pat Cavanaugh, who found the back of the net 4 times and added an assist. Kyle Gallagher, another one of those top college face-off men, 12 of 13 at the face-off X. Like I said, we're going to see these two teams go head-to-head this Saturday. Jordan, what are you looking for out of this matchup, especially from each of these teams as they kick off the bulk of this ACC gauntlet that they have ahead of them?
Well, look, as we talked about earlier, how is Petey LaSalle going to do against Gallagher and Charlie Leonard? Look, these two guys, they're right up there with TD. They're right up there with LaSalle, Savio, our series. I know I missed Rowlett, the names. How is he going to deal with that 1-2 punch? And then from the offensive standpoint, like I said with Virginia, are their guys going to be – look, they're not going to have a half to necessarily waste as they kind of get things going. Notre Dame has been proven to have one of the best defenses in the country. And granted, this is a step up from the competition that they've played. And I'll admit, I haven't watched as much Notre Dame as probably I should have been. But I know they're always going to come with that defense. And as they get into conference play, that's kind of what I'm interested to see. Can this Virginia offense figure it out early against the Notre Dame defense that's going to be that I know Corrigan will have ready? Against other squads, even against UNC, it took them a little bit to get it figured out, against a team like Notre Dame, especially with a guy like Kavanaugh on offense. You're not necessarily going to have a whole half to figure it out before you're going to find yourself, you could find yourself down 6 or 7 goals in the first half, as your offense starts to figure it out. And I'm not the one to sit here and say whether you just play off of one guy or you sit there and you try to keep it moving against and to kind of spread the wealth. Sometimes you do have to go off of the one guy. If Schellenberger gets hot, I say you ride him. But same thing with Doc Sake and Matt Moore. If one of those middies can get hot, I say you ride him that whole first half. See how you go in the second half. Especially as you get later in the game, you're not necessarily riding a hot hand. But I think early on, it's who's going to be able to ride the hot hand on offense just to get to the half. And then as we start to go towards the second half, when those faces are going to start to matter more, is when LaSalle gets tired. Look, these guys are taking more face-offs than ever. That's why it's good that like Notre Dame has that 1-2 punch with Leonard and Gallagher. How does Petey LaSalle counter that, especially as they go later on in the game? I think that's the biggest thing is LaSalle versus those two guys.
Virginia at Notre Dame this Saturday. We'll be talking much more about that game on Thursday's show. The Syracuse Orange also took care of business against the Holy Cross Crusaders, led by Chase Scanlon, 7 goals, and freshman Owen Hiltz, who scored a goal and added 5 assists. 15-6 was the final. What are your takeaways from what seemed like a real good tune-up for Syracuse ahead of their meeting this Thursday night with Duke?
Should they have played Lehigh? That's a question that everyone asks. Look, expected them to roll against Holy Cross. They did just that. Chase Scanlon finally had his coming out party of the year. It's good to see Owen Hill still making these highlight reel plays as a freshman. Don't forget about Stephen Rafis, who should have been on that towards on watch list.
2
He's
goals,
going to be
2
dishing.
assists for Stephen Rafis.
He's going to be dishing the ball out. And look, as they go towards Duke, I have my eye out on JT Giles Harris. Is he going to take the Scanlon matchup, or is he going to have to take Owen Hiltz? That Duke defense as a whole is going to get better. But look, I'm really interested to see who does JT match up on. Is it Hiltz? Is it Chase Scanlon? In my opinion, right now, you got to go on Hiltz, because Chase Scanlon, with all due respect to him as a player, I don't know if he's as consistent as Hiltz has shown to be so far. So I'm very interested to see that. And then how does Syracuse counter that as well with all of their pieces with Trimboli and Scanlon as well. And of course Rafis right there, who's going to be dishing it out to everyone. I'm very interested to see who JT Giles Harris gets matched up on. And then on Duke offensively, I'm interested to see how this is going to be Michael Sowers' first real competition here in the ACC. I think if I had to make one prediction, I think this will be his coming out party. I think he's had some good games against Towson, Air Force, whatnot, but I think this will be the game where we say, wow, this is why Michael Sowers came to Duke. This is why they got him. If I had to make a prediction, he'll go for at least 5 points.
I like that prediction.
Yeah.
This is why Michael Sowers is being looked at as the number one player coming out of this college class. This is what we want to see here. This is what Jordan Johnson wants to see this Thursday from Michael Sowers against Syracuse.
Exactly. I think, like I said, this is the big boy play now. This is conference play. This is where you turn it up. You get the warm-up games. Now we're really ready to see how Sowers goes. And I think Brennan O'Neill as well. He'll have it. He'll put up his numbers. Same thing to Kai Montgomery, who might be the X factor too. I certainly can't wait to see him, especially later in the game. I think as even last year in 2020 in the brief glimpses, they loved to use him late in games more as a scoring threat. And I think depending on how close this game gets, I'm interested to see how that turns out. And then from a goalie perspective, I expect Mikey Aller to continue the kind of role that he's gotten on since he's been officially named the starter. His play has improved from what it was against Denver earlier in the year. I would expect him to have his typical game, although this game could get high scoring quick.
Absolutely. We'll be talking much more as well on Thursday about Syracuse and Duke. That game will be going on 7 p.m. Eastern, Syracuse versus Duke. This weekend, we also saw top-ranked North Carolina stay undefeated as they take down Air Force 15-5. Chris Gray, a likely Tewaaraton finalist, a favorite as well, scored 2 goals and tallied 6 assists on the day. William Perry scored 4 goals for the Tar Heels, along with a 2-goal and 2-assist performance from Nicky Solomon. North Carolina has the weekend off before a Thursday battle with Duke on April 1st, as we were just talking before. Duke getting into their ACC gauntlet right now, similar to Syracuse. This seemed like a tune-up after the win over Virginia. Jordan, looking ahead to this game with Duke, what excites you most about this North Carolina team?
Like you said off the bat, Chris Gray. I'm really interested to see how he fares against the Duke squad. Right now, is he the ACC Player of the Year? My opinion, he is. He's put up the most, or I'm not sure if he's put up the most points, but certainly put up his fair share. He's pretty much a one-man show with all due respect to the other guys on attack, but I'm interested to see, like I said, this is conference play. Is he going to get shut out? JT might have his best game against guarding Chris Gray. Unfortunately, I wish we would have gotten to see it, last year. But that's who I'm interested to see. I'm also, like I said, I'm interested to see that face-off matchup. There's the 1-2 guys with Tucci, North Carolina. That's what I'm really kind of interested to see.
We'll be looking forward to those games. Obviously not this weekend. Next weekend, we will be seeing North Carolina. Actually, next week, during the week, I believe on Thursday, we will be seeing North Carolina Duke. So we will be talking much more about that as we get into next week. Let's talk about Michigan and Penn State. pretty much you could claim it being an upset. Obviously, Penn State at the time was ranked. They were ranked 17th going into the weekend, no longer ranked after this loss. Michigan earns their first win of the season. Bryce Clay, 5 goals. Josh Zawada, 4 goals and an assist for Michigan. On Penn State side, Jackson Reynolds had 3 goals. Mac O'Keefe, 3 goals and an assist. What happened to Penn State here, Jordan? They're falling apart here over the last couple of weeks. What is happening with Penn State?
First of all, glad to see Mac O'Keefe get number 200. And shout out to my boy Stevie McDonald. Got his first call on BTN Plus for the Michigan game. Had to throw that in there. But look, I think this is more of an indictment on Michigan, and it was kind of like that finally. They did, sort of like Hopkins did against Penn State. They finally put it together for 60 minutes on all facets of the game: offense, defense, face-offs. We know Rowlett's going to win the face-offs, but it was good to finally see them put it together. And for Penn State, look, they got to do some soul searching. You don't have Grant and Matt. How do you get Matt the ball and Mac O'Keefe's stick, right? With all due respect to the other guys, Mac O'Keefe's got to take over a couple of these games here. And then how do you get offense going? Maybe do you bring Mac O'Keefe out of the midfield? I've kind of mentioned that on Twitter. I don't know. It's just a thought. Do you bring him back on defense? Do you bring him back in transition? I certainly think he could do it, especially with his box background. You might have to kind of get creative with how you're using him, because at the end of the day, your best player is your best player. And in my opinion, they probably haven't used him enough. Granted, we saw all those years with Ahmet feeding him what his role can be, but I think he can take on that more of an expanded role as we get down here the stretch. And look, they want to stay competitive in the Big Ten. They've got to win some of these games. They're going to see Hopkins again on their field. They're going to see Rutgers again. They're going to get Maryland in College Park. You've got to get at least a couple wins in that stretch. So I'm interested to see what they do from an offensive perspective. Defensively, I think they'll be fine. That's a game-to-game thing. They play as good a defense as I've seen anybody in the Big Ten. It's just got to be a consistency thing, and it's just a game-to-game, matchup-by-matchup scenario. You know, they didn't do a great job against DeSimone, against Hopkins, but that was kind of his coming out party. Against Michigan, they cleaned some of that out. Wasn't just one guy that they were getting beat by, and they actually played relatively great. They played relatively solid defense in that game. So I think for Penn State, it's more of what are you doing on the offensive end, and how are you going to utilize Mac O'Keefe going forward?
Absolutely. Colby Knies in goal also struggled. Part of the issue there with this Penn State team.
I think with Knies, I think he has the ability to be one of the best goalies in the country. Yeah. And I think I've heard Quint Kesnick on the call when they played Hopkins. It's like, for him, it's like a mental thing. And I feel for him, because we just saw him last year, and in 2019, he was one of the best goalies in the country. And I think, and that's why I say, from their defense, as long as he's leading their defense, they'll be fine. And and I think, and another thing too is they didn't get the out of conference, right? All these other teams are getting the out of conference to kind of get these things worked out. They're 5-6 games in. That's kind of, for a team that lost their best player in Ahmet, I would think that's kind of what you need to get rolling. And then you had no fall ball on top of that. So Penn State's one of those teams that they still are just in that phase of figuring out what works. Who are we bringing out the box? How are we utilizing O'Keefe, as I said before? And it's just they'll get it figured out. The question is, will it be too little, too late, to me, especially with all the talent in the Big Ten.
On Saturday, Rutgers, sticking with the Big Ten, Rutgers beat Johns Hopkins 15-9. It was a fairly close game throughout. Rutgers was able to take the lead and pull away there in the fourth quarter. Kieran Mullins, 5 goals and 3 assists for the Scarlet Knights. Connor Kurtz, who has been absolutely unbelievable since transferring here to Rutgers, 3 goals and an assist for Johns Hopkins. Garrett Degnan had 3 goals and an assist. Connor DeSimone, 2 goals and 2 assists. What were your takeaways here from Rutgers going into this game this weekend against Maryland, another big-time opponent for them? Maryland beat Rutgers in their last meeting. What are we thinking? Are we looking forward to from Rutgers?
Bounce back game, certainly well warranted against Hopkins. First half kind of went out as I expected it to. I thought going in that Hopkins was going to play them tough. They certainly did. The thing with Hopkins is that are they going to put it together for 60 minutes? And I think Rutgers did that. Instead of Hopkins doing that, Rutgers did that. And I'm just curious, who do you think their best offensive player is? Do you think it's Sherlin Beatties or Kurtz? Because I'm starting to lean towards Sherlin Beatties. With all due respect to Kurtz, like Kurtz is the best two-way guy in the country, right? He's right up there with the other guy. He's with the Trimbolis and whoever else that you want to put in that conversation. But right now, it's looking like Sherlin Beatties is going to be their guy. I'm curious as to who you think.
I'm a big fan of Kurtz right now. Just his style of play, just because when I played lacrosse, that was my style of play, up and down, back and forth. I obviously I don't have the size that he has. He's a huge individual.
Oh, yeah.
Going to be a nightmare when it comes to the pro game. But I'm a big fan of Kurtz. I also like his brother Colin Kurtz, the goalie. I mean, he's putting together phenomenal performances, really keeping them in these games. I mean, it was a close game throughout. Colin Kurtz was the reason why it stayed close, and then really the reason why they were able to take that lead, able to protect the goal come that fourth quarter. So the Kurtz brothers, I'm a big fan of the Kurtz brothers right now. Definitely Rutgers homer, being from New Jersey.
Would you say that they're your second team in the Big Ten right now? I would still have them as my second team in the Big Ten behind Maryland.
I currently have Rutgers as my number 2, and then obviously this weekend we'll reassess. If Rutgers even was to beat Maryland this weekend, I think we would need to see a lot in order to say, oh, Rutgers is the top team in the conference. But right now it's Maryland's, in my opinion.
Right. Okay. I'm right there with you. I think it's more of who this game between Hopkins and Rutgers shows that Rutgers is the clear-cut number 2 and Hopkins is the clear-cut number 3. Ohio State's right there lurking behind them. And yes, Dan Arestia, I'm saying Hopkins is number 3 even though they won against Ohio State. You can get me on the head-to-head, but you have to realize that was almost essentially a scrimmage against Ohio State. Now that they figured it out, I think now we can really assess them. But I'm all for anybody who wants to argue that head-to-head, and I know that. And look, when they meet again in Columbus later on, I think Hopkins will take that matchup, but that's for another day.
Absolutely. Let's stick here with Maryland, Ohio State. We talked about both of them there real briefly. Maryland 16-8 over Ohio State, and this is really where you're talking about now, where you're dropping Ohio State down to your 4th team in the conference. I think this is really just evidence of it. Like, if we were hoping for a better showing, I think, from Ohio State, if we wanted to consider them maybe the number 3 team, maybe as even possibly the number 2. But obviously after this loss, I think it's safe to say that they're now at least the 3rd best team, if not, as you're saying, the 4th best team.
Fair. Maryland just is going to do what Maryland does, right? They're going to get the early leads. They're going to keep their foot on the gas. I actually say this is more of an indictment. I wanted to see going into this game, I wanted to see if Maryland could keep that momentum. I thought Ohio State would play them tough, as they did. Obviously, look, once Maryland gets going, they're just not going to stop, right? Especially on offense. And their defense behind Brett Baccaro and Nick Grill, and on the short sticks with Smith, and now Kaufman starting to come into his own as a kind of a two-way guy. And Maryland's just going to keep the ball rolling as they get towards being what I think they will win the Big Ten. And from the Ohio State perspective, look, you played that game against Hopkins. Now you got to get your guys involved. Like, with all due respect, like Trey LeClaire, you got to get him more involved. Yeah, he had a goal, but he hasn't been the same guy since that opening weekend, right? And then even from the face-off perspective, I wanted to see a little bit more out of Anasio going against Shockey and whatnot. Just wanted to see a little bit, have Ohio State have that little extra fire to be competitive, especially coming off of what you would consider is, even though despite the fact that they won, was kind of a letdown game in the sense against Michigan. They should have won that by more. And so I'm interested to see Ohio State going forward, whether they're going to go forwards, going to go backwards. Because I think we know what Hopkins is. We know what Michigan is. I think Hopkins will continue kind of that solid trend where they go a little bit up, but it's not, I don't think it can get necessarily worse for Hopkins going forward, especially considering how far they came. Same thing with Michigan. Michigan's one of those teams we still don't know about. They beat Penn State, but would it be fair to say that by now, halfway through, that they're going to remain at the bottom of the Big Ten, just sorely not by performance of their own, but just by the competition they have to face, right? So we know what those two teams are. Ohio State and Penn State are kind of the common denominators here. If Penn State is one of those teams, if they're going to get rolling, they're going to get roll. This is when it's going to start, right? And so Ohio State has to match that. And so that's what I'm interested to see going forward as the Big Ten continues into the second half of their season.
We talk about these Big Ten games against Maryland. Really, the face-off and the goalie, those two games just become so much more important, because when you're playing a team like Maryland, you got to be perfect in every aspect of the game, because you know that Logan Wisnauskas is going to score his goals, Jaron Bernhardt's going to do his damage, Daniel Maltz is going to do his damage.
Shockey from the face-off is starting to come into his own now. Now, I'm not saying he wasn't a threat, but he wasn't up there with T.D. Erlin, Arcieri, right? Arcieri, yeah, I'm right. Arcieri, Gallagher, Leonard. But can you put him in that second group now? Maybe. He's starting to come into his own. You got to deal with him as a threat now. They used to go with the two-guy system. Now it's really just Shockey. And on top of that, like you said, with their offense, get ready for the rest of the Big Ten.
Maryland's looking very, very dangerous. I would say get ready. The rest of college lacrosse has Maryland on their tour here, trying to get back to the Final Four weekend. Let's touch on some more of these games. Number 4, Georgetown took down Providence 14-9. Jake Caraway scored 3 goals. Graham Bundy also scored 4 goals for Georgetown. TJ Haley, 6 assists. Not sure if you called this game, but did you see anything good from Georgetown besides obviously the great win here?
Saw the box score, was not able to catch it, but look, obviously Georgetown's going to keep rolling. I think when we see them play Denver again in DC, that will be what we determine who they are. I mean, we know Jake Caraway is going to put the goal, is going to get the ball in the net. We know that their defense, shout out Jack Rowlett, the best volunteer assistant coach of the year. I didn't say that, but we know what Georgetown's going to be in conference. It's just, unfortunately, this year their really only test is going to be Denver going forward.
And we saw Denver obviously beat Georgetown a few weeks ago. Where do you see Georgetown finishing up here this season, rankings-wise, heading into the NCAA tournament?
I think they're definitely a top 10 team for me. I don't know about the top 5. I think there's too many talented teams in that top 5, but I could see them anywhere from 10 to 12, depending on how that next game against Denver goes. I think they'll keep rolling the rest of the way. And then as we get to that Denver game, that'll be the determining factor, whether they're in the top 8 to 10 or whether they're closer to 12, 13, 14 kind of range.
Sticking here with our top 20 teams, Loyola blowing out Bucknell. They put up 24 goals. Kevin Lindley, 7 goals and an assist. Aiden Olmstead, 3 goals and 5 assists. Joey Kamish, 3 goals and 2 assists. Peter Swindell, 4 goals and an assist. A ton of other big stat lines here from Loyola, just putting a beating down on Bucknell. And I said it with my interview with Reece. So I interviewed Reece. Everybody here watching the show, you'll be able to watch that interview towards the end of the show. But I interviewed Reece on Friday. So we were talking a little bit about Boston. We were talking about the Patriot League a little bit, some of the teams in the Patriot League. And we were talking about Loyola, saying Loyola against Lehigh only scored 6 goals. Did not look good. They come out here against Bucknell and scored 24. just a complete difference, a complete change here in how this team just showed up and played. What are you looking here at Loyola? What's
I'm
the
looking
biggest takeaway from this win from Loyola?
consistency. They finally found it on offense with Olmsted and Kevin Lindley. The rest of those guys, Savio from the face-offs was phenomenal. And with this team, that's what it's going to be. Can they put it all together? Can they be consistent? Can Kevin Lindley be the consistent threat on offense as he's been? That's what's going to, at the end of the day, what's going to determine as they go forward in that Patriot League competition.
Some more college lacrosse scores here that we'll highlight. Number 13, UMass defeated Drexel 13-7. Number 18, Delaware in overtime took down Towson 13-12. And number 19, Vermont defeated NJIT 17-2. Denver and Villanova got postponed. We were really looking forward to talking about that game. Number 16, Navy and Lafayette got postponed as well. Holy
Navy is
Cross
back this week.
as well as TD Erlin. Yes, TD Erlin will be back this week for Denver. We were excited. We were looking forward to talking about it. Really starting the new show. TD Erlin's back in college lacrosse. We're really excited about that. It's all good. We had more stuff to talk about. Some more great things to talk about. Great week of college lacrosse. We have another great week coming up this weekend, obviously starting with Duke Syracuse on Thursday. We will be back on Thursday to talk more about that. Jordan, I want to thank you so much for joining us here for our college lacrosse talk that we had here on our first show of Goal Line Extended. Pat Gregoire will be joining me next to talk about the PLL entry draft. Jordan, thank you again, my man.
Thank you. Let's get this thing rolling all year into the summer. Let's get it, my man.
Extended, presented by Lacrosse Flash.
Welcome back to the show, Tuesday, March 23rd, the first episode of Goal Line Extended. We appreciate you watching and or listening from wherever you are. We're going to be talking the PLL entry draft in a moment. Pat Gregoire is joining us, lacrosse insider and analyst here at Lacrosse Flash. Pat, before we get started, I want to give a quick shout out to Austin Owens, editor-in-chief and social media coordinator here at Flash. He'll be joining us on future shows. Actually, on Thursday, he'll be joining us ahead of the entry draft. But pretty much, I brought this idea to Austin, and he created this entire show idea that I had from the ground up. And what you're watching today is really a product of that man making my ideas come to life. So appreciate you, Austin. Looking forward to working with you, getting you here on the show. But let's get after this thing, Pat. First question I have for you is, first, how are you feeling today? Second question, is there any chance that the currently unsigned Lyle Thompson does not get drafted by the Cannons first overall on Thursday night?
Well, I want to first off say thank you for having me on the show, and shout out to Austin as well. I know you guys have been working really, really hard for this, and I think, we're already off to a running start, and I can't wait to go. And now addressing that Lyle Thompson question, there's just absolutely zero chance that Lyle Thompson doesn't go number one overall. He's a generational talent, a once in a lifetime type of player in the game of lacrosse. He brings just so much to a team when you have him on your roster, on and off the field. So I think it's a no-brainer that he's going to end up with the Cannons. And I mean, you can speculate all you want for that number one pick, but Lyle will be wearing a Cannons jersey this year.
We've known from his days at Albany that Lyle is truly a special player. As of right now, he holds the NCAA points record, obviously in question, or as of right now, possibly we see Michael Sowers getting close to that record. He's dominated the pro game since leaving Albany. Pat, what makes him so special and then so valuable to an expansion team like the Cannons, and how do you see him fitting in on this offense?
I mean, it's so much that makes Lyle so special. And I think that's the thing. It's the abundance of things that he does well. He's not just an elite scorer. He's not, just an elite playmaker or a great two-way player. He's a guy that can literally do everything and anything that you ask him. I'm pretty sure if you told him he's got to strap on the pads and play net, he would do it and do a pretty good job at it while he's at it. But he's a guy that can score at will. He's a great facilitator. He has unbelievable vision, some of the best lacrosse IQ in the game, but his creativity is really what makes him special as well. We see him score goals and set up plays that we've never seen from other players. He's a dominant athlete, and when the ball is on the ground, he's going to be the first guy to that ball as well and pick it up. So he just does so much things on the floor, and we didn't even talk about him away from the field. He's so passionate about the game of lacrosse. I don't know if there's someone who loves the game nearly as much and it means so much to him as well. It's clearly more than just a game for Lyle. And what's he going to do to an expansion team? Well, he's going to do just so much for him. I think he's the type of guy that if he needs to play attack, which it sounds like that's probably where he's going to slide in, he can do that. But he could also run some offensive midfield as well. He's so versatile. He can do so much for a team. And I think he's just going to fit in perfectly and be a great leader for a Cannons team that's going to struggle to have some chemistry early on because they are an expansion team, but he's the type of guy that just makes everyone around him better. And I think he's going to be that cohesive glue that's going to bring this team together early on.
You talk about the struggles expansion teams kind of face. We saw that this past championship series with the Water Dogs, kind of just really the struggle to just gel right away. And then obviously once you get to the second half, you're down a handful of goals. It's tough to come back. We saw them make a comeback against Chrome, just obviously too little too late. You talk about the veteran leadership. They're also bringing in a guy, obviously Paul Rabel, who they got out of the trade with Atlas. Drafted Brody Merrill first overall in the expansion draft. Now bringing on a big third leader in Lyle Thompson, really at each stage of the field. That's got to be good if you're a Cannons fan.
Absolutely. And I think that's such a big, valuable part, especially with this season. It's not going to be a bubble season, but still we don't really know what to expect. There might be some guys that might not be able to travel crossing the border from Canada, whatever it may be. But the more veterans that you have that have been professionals and understand what it takes to win, I think that's only going to be more valuable. And you mentioned Brody Merrill. I think that's a huge pickup. And obviously there's some question marks whether how many games he's going to be able to make it just due to the current global pandemic with the border. But I think even if he shows up to half the games, not only is he going to bring you value on the field, but he's going to give you that value for being that leader. And he's going to teach some of those youngsters that probably they're going to draft. You got to assume that obviously with the collegiate draft, but they're going to try to go for a more younger of a core. It looks like that's what they did. Sean Quirk addressed also in the other draft that we saw last week. So I think they're going to try to be young, but as you mentioned, they're trying to fill in some of those holes as well with some of the older veterans that are going to be able to teach these guys the way.
Absolutely. Reece Eddy, a guy that will be joining me in a little bit, one of those youngsters that Coach Quirk drafted. The Cannons, they picked first overall. The Archers picked second overall. We'll be talking more about the Archers on Thursday. But with all due respect to the Cannons, the expansion team joining the PLL this season, the Atlas have been the team to watch this offseason. Attackman Rob Pennell and Ryan Brown, as well as midfielder Paul Rabel, as we mentioned before, traded away by head coach Ben Rubier for draft picks ahead of the entry draft and college draft. Rubier now has 10 combined picks and will hope to retool this Atlas team. Retool being a word that Austin coined that we've been using quite often lately to describe this Atlas offseason. It all starts here in the entry draft at pick number 3. Rubier received that pick in that Rob Pennell trade. What should be the priority here at third overall?
I think at this point, I don't know if you address position of need because maybe you go for a defender, and if a guy like Ben Randall is on the board, possibly you go for him. But I think you just take the best available player at that point. And I think at number 3, potentially you could have a guy like Dan Baccaro, and he's going to fit in perfectly with that young approach as well, that you're talking about retooling. You're not rebuilding, but you're retooling. But when you are retooling, you want some young elite talent. And that's exactly what Dan Baccaro is. What we saw from him in the MLL bubble season last year, it was remarkable. This guy is an absolute electric factory on the field. He's fast. He's got a deceptive shot. He can play. He can make unbelievable plays, passing the ball. I think he's one of the most elite dodgers that I've seen in the game in a long, long time. And I think that he will fit in perfectly with the Atlas. And I mean, it might bump up a guy like Chris Cloutier out of the starting attack position. But what we've seen from Cloutier, not just in professional lacrosse, but pretty much throughout his entire career, he's a guy that has no problem coming off the bench, being a power play specialist, being a guy that just fits into a role wherever you fit. We've seen him even do that in the box game as well, too. So I think if you pick up a guy like Baccaro, he's going to only strengthen up the rest of that attack core that they do have in place right now.
We've seen a lot really over the last 2 years, and then looking at it for year 3, attackmen playing midfielders running in on attack. I mean, you were just saying before the possibility even Lyle Thompson could run out of the box. We definitely could see that this coming season into the future. But I like that point about Baccaro. Let's talk about the Water Dogs. Andy Copeland's team, one of the hardest hit teams by the expansion draft. They lost 3 players, including Brody Merrill that we talked about before. What should Copeland be looking for here, selecting 4th overall?
I think that this player is going to be here at this point, and I think it's a no-brainer for me. Obviously, being a little bit biased here, being Canadian, being with my box lacrosse roots, but I think if Challen Rogers is on the board at number 4, the Water Dogs have no choice but to take this guy. He is a unbelievable athlete that can play both sides of the ball. If you want him to play D mid and push the ball up the floor, he can do that. If you want him to run some offensive mid, well, he's an unbelievable dodger that has great ability to feed. And then now all of a sudden you have Zach Currier and Challen Rogers playing at the same time. Those 2 guys could probably not even get off the field and run midfield all game long. They're going to just absolutely dominate the ground game with loose balls. They're unbelievable hard workers, but they also can contribute in offense as well, in transition or even in settled situations. So you put a guy like Challen Rogers, who's just a freak athlete that's going to be able to help you out at pretty much any aspect of the game. I think it's a no-brainer. And I think he's going to be available there as well, just based on the top 3 teams that we've already discussed. They have so many needs that they need to address. I think Challen Rogers does fall to 4, and I think it's just going to create an unbelievable dynamic at midfield for a team, like you mentioned, that has lost already so much after just already being an expansion team, finally building something, and then it just kind of gets taken right out from under you. So I think this is a great piece that they can really build on here.
Quirk mentioned too, if he had the opportunities to select more than 3 players, he would have taken 5 if he had the opportunity from the Water Dogs. So definitely tough for Coach Copeland coming off of year 1, what was not the greatest year 1. If you were to ask him, I bet that he would say that as well. But definitely going into year 3, into this entry draft at pick number 4, Challen Rogers would be a great addition to run side by side with Zach Currier.
And I think the thing too is, yes, it wasn't wasn't their best way to jump into the league, and a disappointing season, no less. But this is a team that was pretty much in every single game. They just fell short. You mentioned, obviously, a couple of slow starts that really cost them. So they were very close. And I think now that you kind of have that chemistry built, you think you're moving in the right direction, and then you just get absolutely obliterated by this expansion draft. So now they're going to have a chip on their shoulder again. And I think bringing in a guy like Challen Rogers at that number 4 pick, he's a guy that has won at many levels. He knows what it takes to be a champion. He's young, so he's a guy that's going to be there for a long time. And I think he just fits in perfectly with the run and gun style that we saw the Water Dogs like to play in that championship series. So I know I've said it a million times, and I'll say it until I'm blue in the face. I think that every single person, every coach, every player, any executive, if they had a choice to put a guy like Challen Rogers on their roster, they're going to take that opportunity.
You're talking all the championships. Zach Currier, another guy that has won a ton of professional championships. So you have all that championship experience on one team, especially still a young team, even though all 8 of these teams are still young teams, but a young team, fairly inexperienced team that you bring 2 known winners to. Hopefully we'll see better results here in year 2 for the Water Dogs. Pat, there are over 200 players available in this draft. However, only 24 will be taken over the 3 rounds. My guess is that Friday, Saturday, and really I'm thinking from now until the close of the waiver wire and trade window on May 15, we're going to see a lot of player movement, whether it be teams signing guys off the player pool, teams trading players away ahead of the college draft, and then ahead of that May 15 deadline, Pat, are there any sleepers that we should be keeping an eye out for, especially during Thursday night's entry draft?
Yeah, you mentioned it. I mean, there's just so many players that are available and there's only 24 spots to be taken. So if one of your favorite players don't get selected on Thursday night, don't worry. There's a good chance that they're probably going to get signed. And this guy here, I don't know if he's going to get drafted, but I would be shocked if he doesn't find his way onto a roster. And I'm talking about Latrell Harris. This guy is an absolute freak. Not the biggest name when you talk to folks down south, with the NCAA, never played NCAA lacrosse. He was a guy that really just burst onto the scene in the National Lacrosse League, getting drafted as an 18-year-old. It goes to the University of Brock, which is one of the better programs in Canada here. But he also played for Team Canada. He has the ability to be a short stick defensive midfielder, or you can play some LSM or even close defense. He played on Team Canada. And I think this guy, just the ceiling is so high for him. Just 20 years old as well. As you can really do a little more dive in on the lacrosseflash.com right now with Austin's piece. I know he's a big fan of Latrell Harris and his game, but there's so many other players too. And I'm going to just stick to the Canadian theme, obviously, with my expertise, but you could say Ryan Lee, Mark Matthews, Shane Jackson, but I think those guys are pretty well-known commodities across the game. But for a guy that I would like to really keep my eyes on is Trevor Smith. I have a lot of opportunity seeing him playing in the indoor game with the Halifax Thunderbirds, but this is a guy that has a ton of experience in field lacrosse as well. Played Division III with the Rochester Institute of Technology, RITO wagon in D3 lacrosse. And Smith is a guy that has some professional experience, a little bit in the MLL, playing with the Florida Launch. So he's a freak athlete. He's a guy that can really move the ball up the floor, up the field, I should say. He's a monster on ground balls. He's a guy that probably isn't going to go on Thursday, but again, like Latrell Harris, I think he's a guy that, finds his way onto a roster and could be a very solid piece for any of these PLL teams.
Really, in general, guys that can play with a short stick as well as a long pole. And for a guy like Harris, that reading Austin's article, make sure to check that out at lacrosseflash.com. He can pick up a pole, play down low. He can play LSM. He can play short stick. He can play on a wing if you want to throw him on a wing. Guys like that are valuable. We saw last year, Ryan Reece, a guy that was taken in last year's entry draft, a guy that can really do it all, more becoming an LSM mainly for the Water Dogs. But Latrell Harris, definitely a name to keep an eye out for on Thursday night's entry draft. And as we're saying, in the days and weeks following the entry draft. Definitely some high-profile names to keep an eye out for, though, as really Thursday night's draft unfolds. Again, we will have a show out ahead of the draft on Thursday, so make sure to keep an eye out for that. Follow the show on Instagram and Twitter at GL Extended so you don't miss anything. Pat, thank you so much. We will be back with more PLO entry draft coverage on Thursday, and we're going to get to a quick break. On the other side, Cannon's LSM Reece Eddy. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back. Welcome back to the show. Tuesday, March 23rd, our first episode of Goal Line Extended. We are glad that you are here watching and or listening. As a reminder, the show is available on YouTube at youtube.com/Goal Line Extended and across whatever podcast platforms you might be using. On YouTube, we will be posting the full show as well as shorter clips from the show. So make sure you go check that out and subscribe. You can also follow along at GLE Extended on Instagram and Twitter. We will be posting show clips as well across social media, so make sure to check that out. Links will be in the description below. And joining us now is one of the newest members of the Cannons Lacrosse Club. He was selected 5th overall by Coach Quirk in the entry draft earlier this month after a breakout rookie season in the PLO Championship Series this past summer with the Chrome, and he is now hoping to help his new team defend a title because, as we all know with the PLO this summer, there are 2 teams looking to defend a championship. So without further ado, joining us now, Cannons LSM, Reece Eddy. Reece, thank you for joining us, my friend.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Absolutely. So, Reece, we haven't spoken since the 2020 championship series pretty much wrapped up. The last time we talked was right after you got drafted. You went off. That I think that's like the best way to say it. You went off here in this 2020 PLO championship series. We were thinking like, oh, rookie Reece Eddy, a bunch of new young polls kind of with this Chrome group. And all of a sudden, it was like Reece Eddy just kind of came up out of nowhere. You were in the conversation, not just for Defensive Rookie of the Year, which, first off, you would have won if there was a Defensive Rookie of the Year. I probably would have given you my vote if there was a Rookie of the Year. You and Grant Amen obviously being the 2. You were in the conversation for LSM of the championship series. How, just wrapping your head around all of that, how did that, just looking back on it, wrapping your head around it, how does it feel?
No, it was a crazy 2 weeks for sure. I mean, I didn't have much for expectations going into it. Obviously, rookie coming in with the 18 people on the roster. Obviously, you think you're going to get some playing time, but getting there and then getting set up, meeting all the guys, that first couple of days of practice, it was an awesome experience. And obviously, the accolades are good and all, but we didn't get the job done at the end. But still, an incredible experience.
Now you're leaving that group. What was the conversation? Because I figured you were going to get protected. I think a lot of people figured you were going to get protected. But then you look at it again, it's like, all right, so there are a few names where I guess you could say I wouldn't have been one to try. I first of all wouldn't have wanted to be the person to decide that. So you will credit Coach Sudan here. I wouldn't, if I had that job, I don't know what I would have done. Because really looking at all the rosters, your team, Chrome's team's roster was one of, I think, the more difficult ones to break up, if that makes sense. It was one of the, I think, one of the more difficult ones to say, all right, so here's the 14 I want to keep. And then there's other guys like yourself where it's like, oh, he's a young player who, put on a show here in this championship series. We want to keep him around. But then again, I guess you look at that mindset of, oh, we put 2 guys available, or you're available. I guess for a guy like Andy Towers, he is probably stoked right now that Troy Ray's coming back, but probably would have been the same way if Troy Ray was to get selected and not you. It would have been the same thing for Coach Sudan. But you're joining the Cannons. Excited about that, obviously. What were those conversations like with Coach Quirk just leading up to the expansion draft?
Yeah, so he called me it was probably a week or so before the draft. I was on my way home from work. It was a quick talk. It was probably 5 minutes. He goes, "You interested in playing?" I said, "Of course I am." There was no doubt in my mind with that answer. So, he's been shooting some texts in our little group chat, getting everyone fired up. So I'm excited to get after it with him.
Like I said, as of right now, all he knows is he's defending a championship, just like the Whipsnakes are.
Yeah.
Putting together
a mindset going in.
We're going to be putting together a whole new team this coming Thursday. But as of right now, he's trying to defend a title. That's got to be the mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was the message in the group chat as well. Everyone has low expectations of a new team coming in with a bunch of new guys. So the bar is low for everyone else for us, but I think we have a pretty high standard going into it. So I'm excited.
So these guys, besides the players, obviously that got drafted, that were on Chrome last year as well, do you know any of these guys or have ever talked to any of these other guys that now you're going to be teammates with?
Just from playing, being in the bubble, you get to talk to some of them. Obviously, it was a little different this year because they try to separate us with everything going on. But I know music and everything from Sam Duggan, obviously high school, and then played with him in the bubble. Just people just from playing lacrosse. Outside of that, nothing too serious.
That's probably also got to be really I guess I'm trying to think of a better word for it, but you got a guy like Connor Busick, a guy like Paul Rabel already there, Brody Merrill coming in. You're going to be working with a lot of veteran, and you're probably going to be bringing Lyle Thompson. I don't know if you're going to – I was going to ask you, do you know who you're picking? But
no, I have no idea.
I'd imagine Lyle Thompson. If it's not Lyle Thompson, there might be an uprising, honestly, amongst the lacrosse Twitter world. But guys like Connor Busick, Brody Merrill, Paul Rabel, just veteran guys that, you're going to be able to learn from. What's really the takeaways you're hoping to take away from those experiences with those guys?
I mean, those guys you're listening are just some legendary people. Obviously well known to the lacrosse community. So going into it, that's just try to be a sponge the whole time. Just absorb everything they're saying, and just try to follow in their footsteps is the least I could do.
Oh yeah, those are some big shoes to fill. And then obviously, I would imagine if they got drafted, we heard the quotes from Coach Quirk saying that he wanted to bring Rabel in obviously immediately. I would imagine the expectation would be that there's not going to be like a 1-2 year thing. It's going to be a multi-year thing. Even with Busick having his Cornell job, I guess we're going to be looking at a pretty big, or I guess long tenure for these guys that you'll be able to play with. Brody Merrill, we're not sure, 38, but he's still kicking. I'd imagine he's still going. You're planning on going.
Yeah, I'm sure he's still got an extra few years in him.
Oh yeah. Entry draft's coming up for your team. You got the first pick. You say you don't know who you're taking, but I'd imagine you're taking Lyle. You do have the 6th overall pick, though. Just being from a player perspective, what would you think that would be a good addition for your new Kansas Lacrosse Club?
I mean, that good thing I would get paid to make those decisions. So that's hard. You got all those guys that are extremely skilled and talented. So I would never have any idea how to put together a roster. So that question's best served for the people higher than me.
Oh yeah, we'll leave that on Coach Quirk. But yeah, the entry draft's coming up. Your team picks first after a solid 18 plus Paul Rabel in the draft in that trade. So do you have a March Madness pick for me?
Syracuse +3 tonight, baby.
Syracuse.
Yep. All right. Have to. That's a given. You have to. Hometown. You can't go anywhere else.
You are from Syracuse. You're from up north New York?
Yeah, upstate Syracuse, right outside of Syracuse.
All right.
I mean, I think if I said anything else, I'd have some people after me.
Well, you were a Canisius guy before Boston University.
Yep.
Where's Canisius?
Canisius in Buffalo.
Canisius.
So it's like,
okay.
Yeah, it's 2 hours outside of Syracuse. About. Yeah, so that was you're still a Cuse fan all the way out there.
There we go. I got Illinois. I'm rocking Illinois.
You have to. I mean, won by 31 or something earlier today.
Boston University. You guys have kind of had it tough this season thus far over at BU. You did have that close one with Army not too long ago. What's the hopes here back half of the NCAA season for your alma mater?
I mean, I'm sure the spirits are high after that. Obviously, you don't want to lose, but to have a close one like that to Army's an extremely tough and hard team to play. So I think the expectations are going up for them. I think they had a great win last weekend against, I think it was Holy Cross, and then they got a good one against Colgate tomorrow. So I think expectations are Patriot League championship, or I mean that's everyone's expectation as you're playing, but I think they got it in them. They got the young guys coming out that are showing out. So I think, expectations is definitely a championship for them.
So now in the Patriot League, it's Boston, it's Loyola, it's Lehigh,
Colgate.
I'm thinking that the two that Boston will be competing with, Lehigh and Loyola. We saw them go down. They went at it a few weeks ago. Lehigh beat them, right? Yeah. Loyola didn't look good.
No, it was like 10-6, something like that.
Yeah. So that's what we're working with. Any guys from Boston right now, seniors, maybe juniors, that you're thinking possible PLL material?
Andrew Volk, for sure. He's a short stick D-mid. Have to shout him out.
All right.
Yeah, that roster's loaded, though. There's some guys that are sneaky picks that could definitely make it out here.
Short stick D-midi. The thing with the PLL, obviously the short field, you excelled on the short field. So really it's just finding those types of guys that would be able to take advantage of the quick transition, the right off the face-off wings, winning ground balls, getting right into quick offense. You were able to do that pretty much all summer and looked very good doing that. And now you're going to be doing it with the Cannons. 3 face-off guys that Coach Quirk took So 3 guys that you might be working with. What's your, based on connections you have with those guys, conversations you've had with those guys, what's the plan looking at this summer in terms of the face-off wings? Because I'd imagine I'll be seeing you out there on one of those wings for these guys.
I mean, I have no game plan, just kind of work off of them. They're the ones who deal it, and then I just kind of react to it. So, like this past summer with Farrell and Forbes, you just kind of go out there. They'll instruct you what to do. So you trust them, and then you just kind of hope you're in the right spot for it. Kind of react to it. Anticipate more than anything.
Yeah, you were getting some nice ground balls. I just know that last year. You had Schreiber on one. We had a highlight package put together. I don't know if we're gonna be able to use it, but we do have a highlight package put together, and it literally the first clip was of you stripping Tom Schreiber and that sick ground ball pickup that you had.
Did you guys cut off the clip where I threw it away right after?
Yep. Well, we had it in there. Thank you. But that was the first clip, and that was the first thing I saw, and I was just like, first off, by the graphic that we have, it's pretty cool. And then the clip followed. I was like, whoa, like I was not ready for that. I knew we did that at some point, but I just was not ready for that clip to come at me so fast like that. But
yeah, that was definitely a lucky check, but
lucky trail checks.
You always gotta be grateful for those.
So first season in the PLO, was it what you expected? In terms of the competition, obviously it was weird being that it was in the bubble, but I guess really just the pro feel, because I know that's what, we were talking with some guys last year when I was doing the former show that I had, and a lot of the guys were saying it was just the jump from, you're just kind of just flying in on a Friday to play a game on a Saturday, you're out by Sunday, but this was obviously a different situation. But even with, expecting it to be this summer, it's going to be coming, have a nice practice the day, the morning before the game. And then you have the game, you hang out with the team afterwards. What has really just the whole experience been like compared to what you expected?
I mean, it exceeded expectations for sure. It kind of brought you back to summer lacrosse where you hang out with your teammates all day and kind of joke around, do whatever you want for a little bit. And then when it comes time to be serious, you play lacrosse. So it was definitely exceeded expectations for me. And the pro feel was definitely there. You come from college, you're either in school, you're playing lacrosse. So it was a little different not to have to focus on school and actually play lacrosse and hang out with the guys. So, I mean, being catered on pretty much the whole entire time, not have to pay for anything. You can't beat that.
And you had a pretty tight-knit group. I feel like all the teams had pretty tight-knit groups, but you guys, it seemed like specifically, had a very tight-knit group for Chrome. Obviously, that gets broken up sort of. For the most part, they keep their core group of guys, but just that whole experience with them, what was that like?
I mean, they were awesome. That was a fun group for sure. There was never a dull moment in practice, games, or hotels. So Coach Sudo definitely picked the right group of guys there, and obviously they have some history being on the Rattlers and from there on, but they're definitely a fun group of guys. There's some quotes that are probably inappropriate that I can't say, but there'll be memories forever for sure.
We had John Rannigan back before the season started. It might have been the weekend or 2 weekends before the season started, and he had me laughing pretty much the entire time.
No, he was something else. That him and Wolf going back and forth are a great combo.
That defensive group that you were with last year, it was Pulver. Pulver's now coming with you to the Cannons. Guys like Eli Salama. What'd you learn from those guys? Just in terms of them being pros, you being the new college guy coming in, what'd you learn from those guys?
I mean, they're all solid. It's definitely a transition from college lacrosse where you're getting on someone at like 14 yards. I had Galloway in my ear when I'm not on them by like 20. So there's definitely a little bump in the road with that. But all those guys, Jesse, Pulver, Manley, they're all solid guys where they're going to coach you through the things in the game as they're happening, as well as after practice and some film. So I was very grateful for them taking me along, kind of show me how the ropes, and they definitely made the transition a little easier for me.
I was about to say, working with a guy like John Galloway as a young player just seems like the perfect fit, perfect match. If I was a young player, I feel like that would be the guy I'd want directing me, or him, or I guess I would say Brody Merrill. So you're going to have the best of both worlds. You can go from Galloway to a guy like Brody Merrill. That's going to really have you in check, the entire defense as a group in check. and then hopefully minimize mistakes and not allow goals, win some games.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a learning curve to start learning from Galloway, but then you got the hang of where he wanted you to be. So he let you know if you were in the right place or the wrong place. So definitely was a fun summer with him.
So 3 face-off guys. What are we thinking? Do all 3 of these guys make the team?
I'm like I said, I'm not the coach, so I don't make the decision.
22 spots, 22 game spots, I think. I don't know if they locked up the game spots number yet, but
Yeah.
I think it's 22 spots. I've heard rumors of trade one of them for someone else. I don't know how that works. I don't know, but I guess we'll see how that all shakes out. I was just very intrigued when I saw. I was sitting on the beach, by the way, Key West, listening to the draft, and they were named off the second face-off. I don't know who they took. I think they took Fowler before Kelly, and they said Fowler, and I was like, well, I was actually one of the few people that I think was expecting possibly 2 goalies and possibly 2 face-off guys. And I just wasn't thinking Fowler. And I was like, oh, Fowler got taken. I guess that's the direction they want to go with Semino. And then they go Kelly. And I was like, what? they said Jack Kelly or Steven, like Tommy Kelly. But figured that out. I was just very surprised. Leave it at that. I was very surprised. Coach Quirk went with 3, but obviously the entry draft pool, I think it's going to be an entry draft, and then possibly the day after there might be a slew of signings.
Probably going to be some trades. Yeah.
Slew of signings, trades. I'm thinking there's teams filled up probably to 30. So the competition gets even hotter at that point.
Absolutely. I mean, there's how many teams in the ML last year? And then only one new one being added. So you got 5 teams worth of guys that are just out there. So there's a lot of competition for sure coming in. It'll be nice. It'll be definitely be more competitive than normal. So I look forward to it.
What were your initial thoughts on the PLO MLO merger?
I mean, I was excited. There was always that like beef, which one's better, and that stupid stuff. But now it's just great for the sport. I mean, you get all these people tweeting about it, make social media getting out there, Chris Hogan coming. That just makes the sport, it takes it to a whole nother level where people are taking it more serious. So it was definitely a great move on both ends.
The Chris Hogan signing, I wasn't surprised by. I feel like I felt that was coming for a while. Once I kind of was like, oh, he's kind of dwindling out of his football career. I was like, it seems like what's going to happen, and it happened. So I'm pretty pat myself here on the back, even though I never even
leaked it.
Never made public my thoughts and my opinion that I thought that was going to happen. But maybe next time we should start tweeting out bold predictions.
Should. No, he's probably one of the best athletes if he comes in, and when he comes in, he's going to be one of the best athletes no matter what. So I think he'll have a pretty good shot at making a roster at some point, or if not this year.
Fortunately, you probably won't have to be covering. I think he's going to be a defensive midi. So you might
I hope I don't have to do anything in transition. Yeah, he'll have some shake that I don't know if I'll be able to handle.
I feel like he's going to be a transition nightmare now that you say it.
Yeah, 100%.
He's going to be flying down probably in like Atlas blue. Probably not an Atlas blue now. At first, it was a thought he's going to be an Atlas blue. He might be in your Cannons blue now. So maybe you'll be playing.
That wouldn't be bad. That'd be way better than having to deal with him.
Very exciting stuff. Reece, I'm glad you came on. Glad you joined in. First guest on Goal Line Extended. Hopefully many more ahead of us.
Yeah, hopefully many more. Absolutely. I'm always up for these.
Absolutely. Reece, thank you so much for joining me, my man. I appreciate it. And we'll talk to you soon. Hopefully talk to you very soon. What's going on, everyone? I just wanted to take a moment and jump back in here to wrap up our first show of Goal Line Extended. And thank you all for watching and or listening. We had an incredible first show, and we will be back on Thursday ahead of the PLO entry draft. So make sure to keep an eye out for the next show. Subscribe on YouTube and follow along on Instagram and Twitter at GL Extended so you don't miss anything. Until then, I hope you all have an incredible day, and we will see you on Thursday.
Follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at GL Extended, and subscribe to the show on any of your favorite podcast outlets. You can find Lacrosse Flash on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and online at lacrosseflash.com.